Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be looking at the weekly metagame breakdown for the historic best of 3 format on MTG Arena. We're going to look at the best performing, highest win rate, top decks of the last week and what's kind of pushing its way into Mythic rank for the week. As always, we get the data from Untapped.gg, what you see on the screen, companion tool that tracks your win rates with other users. There's a whole bunch of cool stats. You can do draft overlays, in-game overlays to help you know like draw percentages. Whole bunch of cool stuff with Untapped. So if you want to get started with them, link is in the video description. I'll timestamp and paste all these deck lists as always, so you can find them and kind of go from there. A programming note for the next week or so, we are getting his Pioneer Masters on Tuesday. As such, Pioneer, Historic, and Timeless. Usually there's about a 3 to 7 day gap between the data as they curate for the new set. So the extended formats, we'll put them on pause for about a week so as we get the new data and then go really heavy on them in terms of a whole bunch of stats. So a little bit more standard to start the week, and then tail end we'll be covering all the new cards coming into the client. We'll say power level on some of them are lower, so don't go like full crazy spending wild, like spending packs. Like a lot of this stuff's kind of dated already for Pioneer, so don't go crazy. Like I'm gonna be calm, let's say. Might do some drafts, spend some wild cards, and kind of go from there. This is a Modern Horizons style power level. And just before we go into all the details, really quick on the top left-hand corner, you'll see a charity goal. This charity is every penny I make off YouTube this month, I am donating it to a local Toronto-based food bank. So every view counts towards some pennies earned. So the more you watch, the more I can raise and then donate to help those in need over the holiday season. So we have a goal of $800 that we're trying to reach. First weekend, we are $200, a little bit over that. So making good progress towards that goal. So watch the videos, it helps. Alrighty, so jumping in. We have the kind of breakdown, Boros decks. It's still kind of early in the month, so Boros could be a mix of energy and auras. Selesnya is the Devotion deck. Dimir can be a whole bunch of just like frog decks, stuff like that. So it's a little too early for the week with all the kind of turn of the new season to get kind of a nice breakdown in this. So we'll just jump into the deck lists themselves and kind of really quickly scanning back up. Even just like in the last week, there's only been 4,800 games, so it's a little bit low in terms of population. We do have Selesnya Devotion kind of making a return at 83%, which is kind of big for this deck. It's kind of fallen off on the wayside. The Selesnya part comes from Elish Norn, Mother of Machines. Otherwise, it's Mono Green Devotion, the Karn deck. You have your Accelerants and Birds of Paradise, Halfling, Utopia Sprawl. This version's playing a copy of Keen-Eyed Curator. Some main board Graveyard Hate. That can become a big creature on its own if you kind of exile what's the equivalent of Delirium. 1 Pelucranos, 1 Scrap Shooter as some flexible removal. The big core of the deck is using Kiora to tap and tap Nykthos, as well as Oathcaster Trailblazer and Kiora's static ability to draw you a bunch of cards with when big creatures come in. Storm the Festival is a payoff that lets you kind of churn through your deck, and then Karn gives you access to a Karn board. So deck's very easy to sideboard. You hit submit. Graveyard Hate, Artifact Enchantment Hate, activated abilities, removal. Sacrifice decks is very good against. Liquid Metal Coating can shut off activated abilities, and with Karn's plus blow up lands. Pestilence Cauldron, while it's a black card, you search it for its Restorative Burst, the backside. And then with, I think, 16 mana, a Kiora and Karn in your graveyard, and a Kiora and Karn in the battlefield, you can basically just keep playing it over and over again. Karn can fetch copies of Restorative Burst from exile, so you can keep casting it, and it's a pseudo infinite life combo. 1 ring for card advantage, for Phyrexian Metamorph to copy stuff. Skyship Sovereign, whatever it's called, just removal that's kind of reoccurring. What you could do is actually plus with Karn on the Sky Sovereign to not have to worry about crewing. God Pharaoh can be taxing for some of the low mana decks. Mindslaver, take over your opponent's turns. Akroma's Memorial, if you build a big enough board, you can give him haste that turn. Cityscape as removal, and then Portal Phyrexia, really good against Boros Auras, stuff like that. Also seeing a single copy of Woodlands in here, just to copy a creature if you want. Moving on, we got Boros Auras, 83%. So I know some folks had got like early #1 Mythic with this. He's gotten it 2 of the last 3 months, I think. He always hits me up on Instagram whenever he hits it at the beginning of the month. But this deck here is built around the Aura package. So you have Allura's Companion and 2 kind of cards that care about auras in Light Paws and Core Spirit Dancer. Gets bigger, draws you cards, lets you toolbox and tutor. The big kind of card of the deck is Sheltered by Ghost, which is removal, life gain, protection, all in one. Giver of Runes protection, Esper Sentinel as tax effect. So you make a big creature, smash in, and ruin your opponent's hopes and dreams. What's interesting with this version, you have Hushbringer in the main and Amped Raptor in the side. You usually see that inverted, but shuts off ETBs, and then in the grindier matchups, you have Amped Raptor. Activated abilities, Lauren's Escape for targeted removal that's not exiled, Fragment is cheap removal, and then Tormod's Crypt for graveyard hate. We then have Izzet Wizards. So the stock kind of older version of Izzet Wizards thus far this month has been doing better than the new chorus version, which we'll take a look right after this. But this version here is a split of Shove Aside and Play with Fire in the 1-drop slot, your usual wizard friends, Sleight of Hand over Opt. I usually prefer the instant speed because it allows you to play trickier in the sense where you have prowess effects so your opponent doesn't know where the damage is coming from. Slick Shot in here, Expressive Iteration, which is a card that's largely fallen out of these lists in lieu of just like cheaper interaction, stuff like that. Wizard's Lightning, Flame of Anor. Flame of Anor is just a really flexible, amazing card, all things considered. Into the Flood mod, cheap bounce effect, helpful against the Boros Auras deck where your damage doesn't do as well. Barrage gets around Ward, which is nice against like Light Paw, stuff like that. Spell Pierce, Stern Scolding, cheap disruption. Stone of Erich for the various kind of sacrifice decks. Surgical, Graveyard, and like just take their cards from their deck, and then Aether Gust for red and green based decks. So just want to show it, but the chorus list, so I know all got fairly high last month with this deck, but since then it's kind of fallen off at 48%. These cards are still very strong. So Hymn to Ages and Ribald Shanty both got buffs. So these kind of work. They have starting intensity, and then whenever you cast it, all your other chorus in your deck, hand, whatever, increase their intensity. So this starts off as a 2-mana draw 1, but it's very easy to have this become a 2-mana draw 3, 4, 5 cards. The Shanty is a shock that just scales up its damage as well, which is nice. Sorry, couldn't mute in time. Snapcaster can buy them back and then add to that. You have Slick Shot in here, and then your normal wizard package, Wizard's Lightning, Flame of Anor. So that's kind of the idea. So I'm not going to include this list this week, but just kind of give you an idea of what other folks are. Seems like this list is doing better this week. You have the Sam Combo deck, so 80% on this one. How this deck works is it's using Birthing Ritual to kind of find creatures in your deck, and most notably a copy of Samwise Gamgee, a Sacrifice Outlet, Bartholomew, or Goblin Bombardment, and then Cauldron Familiar. Sam makes a food token, Familiar comes in, you can sack it, and then just bring it back, making a food token, creates a loop where you can ping or drain them out. Trap Finder and Lucky Witness help you dig through your deck. The Birthing Ritual helps you dig as well. You have the Ajani Bombardment backdoor package, the Amped Raptor to help you kind of cascade into your effects. Artifact Enchantment Hate, cheap removal, Sacrifice Mirrors, Remorseful Cleric as graveyard hate that can be tutorable through the Birthing Ritual. We have Boros Energy, so this is a Jengantha version of the deck. Oh no, not even Jengantha, just no Luris Companion. 80%, so Flage, One Ring, kind of to like the modern version. Usually these play Jengantha, so you can get away with it. There's nothing in this deck that's preventing you from it, so something to keep in mind. There are a number of cards that are somewhat nerfed compared to the modern version, Oscillate's Guide and Galvanic, but Bombardment, Ajani stays winning. Garrison Cat, it's a cat that works with the Ajani package. You have Leonin Vanguard, so more kind of a cat tribal-esque themed that plays into it. Fragment, Path, cheap removal. You have Portable Hole, Static Prison, all in that lieu. Thraben Charm, really flexible, can hit a bunch of different things. Get Lost, same idea. Your Surgicals, and then your Needle, Disruptor, Flutes for any sort of activated abilities. Karns, Kioras, stuff of that nature. Then we have Mono Blue Eldrazi, 80%. So this deck here, you have Archway of Innovation. So this allows you, the next spell you cast has Improvise. So what you're trying to do with this deck, someone got really high mythic with this a couple months back, and I was talking to him about the deck. So you could discard any number of cards with Tamiyo Meets the Story Circle, and then you investigate twice for each card discarded this way. By doing so, you're then able to Portent of Calamity with the Improvise through the Archway. So you can tap those artifacts. You reveal the top X cards of your library for each card type. You may exile a card from among them, put the rest into your graveyard. You may cast a spell without paying if you exile 4 more cards that way. So it's kind of a ramp deck that can then cheat out Eldrazi's or Ugins or stuff like that. Ugin's Binding is kind of a one-sided bounce. When you cast big stuff, you have some early ramp, and then Chalice to lock out your opponent on some of the cheaper spells of the curve. Activated abilities, cheap counters, Sacrifice, again, defense grid against heavy counterspell decks, Torpor Orb for ETB effects, Ulamog and Emrakul. So if you want to try to mill them out or just exile permanents, Emrakul can take over their turns in kind of the mid-range battles. You also have Ugin's Labyrinth in the mana base here that allows you to generate 2 mana by exiling one of your creatures here, one of your big spells. Mardu Sacrifice, 78%. So this one here is another bombardment deck. Energy is very strong. This one's got Marionette Apprentice. You have Johnny's again. Cthulhu Nightmares can kind of work through loops. Corrupted Conviction and Village Rites both as card advantage engines. You have Claim that can steal their stuff and then sacrifice it. Very strong against like auras if you could get around protection effects. Stuff of that nature there. Sideboard, you have just cheap removal in various forms, Hand Hate with Juggernaut Peddler and Thoughtseize, Rite of Oblivion, flexible removal that can be flashback, and then the Stone for sacrifice decks. Dimir Ninjas. So no more Lurrus Companion because you have Kaido, Bane of Nightmares, Ninjutsu in, Anthem for your ninjas, taps things down, hexproof on your opponent's turn, so just tough to deal with. Really, really strong Planeswalker here. Ingenious Infiltrator draws you cards when your ninjas deal combat damage. So a very kind of powerful engine. Mockingbird could copy your stuff. You have all these ninjutsu creatures with then pairing with nicely with like Ornithopter that's pseudo-evasive, unblockable with Outcast. You have the Retrofitter Foundry that works with these cards too to make you 4/4s. So strong overall kind of theme with the deck. Spell Pierce, Stone of Erich. Again, kind of cheap interaction, Hand Hate, Edict is strong against like Aura, stuff like that, cheap bounce, and then Toxic Deluge for the go wide decks. Azorius Affinity, 68%. So this one here, blue-white Affinity, built around Seeded Synod coming in. So we didn't get all the colors, we only got it for black and blue for these artifact lines. It works with Affinity, so it makes your cards cheaper. So Thought Monitor, costs as little as 1 mana. Thoughtcast, same idea. So a bunch of ways to draw 2 with this deck. You are using like Shadow Spear, Springleaf Jump, just cheap ways to kind of add to your board. Retrofitter Foundry Ornithopter, Emery can rebuy stuff. Cheap counters and Rebuke, Frogmite's a free creature. And then Kappa Cannoneer can be cheated out for basically 1 mana, then becomes a big unblockable hard to kill creature. Graveyard Hate, Artifact Enchantment Hate, cheap removal. We covered a lot of these against any sort of enchantments. You have Back to Nature, Graveyard Hate, and Dispute as cheap counters. And then lastly, we have Jeskai, Thopter, Jeskai, cancel your ETBs, mid-rangey kind of deck. So we've seen Strict Proctor decks with Lotus Field. This one's playing proper mana base without that, but you have Hushbringer, Earthkeeper Thrall, and Torpor Orb that shuts off ETBs. Pair that with like Flage so you don't lose it that turn. You won't get the ETB Lightning Helix, but you'll get the attack trigger after. Same with Null Drifter, 3 mana basically is draw you 2 cards because this is a cast trigger. Then you have a 4/4 Flying Annihilator, Tajik in here. So cool little mid-rangey shell. You have the energy package. Wrath of Skies is very strong against like the energy decks, the aura decks, stuff like that. So it's kind of mid-rangey, control-y kind of elements. Arena Glory can haste out your big stuff. Chandra for heavy counter spells. Djinn, Kalim can be used for kind of tempo elements against like auras. It's pretty strong. Tap them down. Purge as a sweeper for aggressive decks. Surge of Hope for combo decks. Needle for kind of activated abilities. That's it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing, what you've been liking, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.